Greetings YouTube, Captain Machine here, back for another short, and once again, it's going to be a long one. Basically, the news has come out that they are working on a 5th edition or a next iteration of Dungeons and Dragons. We, at this moment in time, have no idea what shape it or form it will take, so I'm not going to do the fanboy reaction thing of going, oh, it's the best thing ever, or oh, I hate it with a passion, it's a terrible idea. So what I'm instead going to do is retrospectively look at 4th edition of Dungeons and Dragons, and bear in mind this is from a guy who has barely played it more than say half a dozen times, has only run it once, and only owns the first 3 books, and only read the online stuff for as long as it was free, and when they locked it down for paying customers I stopped reading it. So I am not the best person to give this retrospective for, and I do welcome any comments or video responses below. I really love video responses, by the way. Either correcting me if I've made any mistakes, or giving an alternative opinion. So with that in mind, let's get started. First of all, I was quite happy about the idea of a 4th edition when it was first announced, because, as I've said before, by the end of 3.5 I had enough of the system. There was a lot of things in it which I didn't like, I wasn't enjoying at all, and the idea of a 4th edition which would fix a lot of the problems really appealed to me. And I think this may be a timing thing, because I know that Pathfinder the beta came out before 4th edition came out, so by that point my group were deeply entrenched into Pathfinder. But I remember going to the UK Game Expo, what, 3 or 4 years ago, and maybe even 5 years ago actually now thinking about it, my first ever UK Game Expo, and playing the pre-release version of 4th edition with those little adventures they ran at the convention. And I remember quite enjoying playing it. I remember looking at the models moving around and seeing how they affected things around them and such and so forth, and really enjoying that aspect of it. And a lot of people have used the criticism in the past that 4th edition is an MMO-esque game, and I don't think that's a criticism. I think that's the distinction. I think that what they've done is they took some of the ideology, some of the design aspects, and some of how the community approaches an MMO, and adapted that for the RPG, where you've got characters with defined roles, you've got classes which have specific duties and tasks. Obviously you can multi-class out of that, but for the most part that is what you do. You feel much more heroic, much more like, because after all, in say World of Warcraft for example, which is where the main comparison comes from, but bear in mind that at the time this came out, World of Warcraft, although was the biggest MMO, was not the only one. So although I would suspect that if any design decisions came from WoW by itself, then that would be the failure to the group, to the company. Rather, it would be more appropriate for them to dip the toe into a little bit of everything. So I kind of like how that design aspect went. I wasn't a big fan of the skill challenges. I thought they were a bit silly. I thought that, especially with a group that wasn't fueled by imagination, it would be difficult to get them to do anything more than roll the same skill stat over and over again until they passed the required number of times. So I wasn't a huge fan of skill challenges. But I could have easily just removed them. In fact, I believe I actually did remove them when I ran the game. I never used them. I used regular skill checks for particular tasks, but I never used skill challenges. So there is that aspect that you can just turn on or turn off certain rules if you wish to do so. And my group never even realised I did that. I don't think, with the exception of one person who actually was there when I played the pre-release version, where skill challenges even existed. So that was kind of interesting. I think, and this, I'm going to be honest with you, there's a lot of negative aspects to this. Not in terms of, oh, the game was terrible. I think these are bad choices by Wizard of the Coast. First of all, I don't know what the backroom deals and going on with such and so forth were with Paizo, but Paizo clearly had a stick up their craw so massive when it come to losing the Dungeons and Dragons, the Dungeon and Dragon magazine license, and that's what made them do what they did in terms of Pathfinder. And more power to Paizo for doing that. But I think that when you give your biggest competitor a opening like that, and they take it and they run with it, and they're outselling you, which they are, then you kind of have to look back and think maybe somebody bit off their nose to spite their face. Maybe it would have been a better idea to keep these guys on board than make them the enemy. Because after all, they've proven that there was plenty of people out there that were happy with 3.5 with a few tweaks and would have kept on playing it. To the point where the majority of my D&D stuff back there is 3.5 material. All of my Pathfinder stuff is on PDF on my iPad. With the exception of the core rule book and the Absalom book, which is where my current campaign is set. I really got excited when they started talking about the online applications of 4th edition. The idea of an online magazine rather than a physical one was kind of like novel and unique and interesting. I don't think the world is ready for it. I think now we're at that stage where you can sell an online magazine in PDF format to a niche audience like role players and make some money out of it. I don't think that including it with a subscription base with other features may not have been the best way to go, especially not when they first announced it. Maybe now it does a lot better, but I don't think back then it was a good idea. And I could see where they were going with it, and when I was reading the Dungeons and Dragons magazines that came out in the electronic format before they went, because it was free for a few months to start with, before they actually started asking for money, I was reading those at work, because back then I could do that. And although I was enjoying the magazine, I couldn't see anything that was worthy of my money. And that was a problem, because if I, looking at this material, couldn't see what I would be paying for, then how was I going to pay for it? And a lot of the key features either came late or didn't come at all. Like, for example, the online character creation. The idea of an online character creation system and you could store your characters online was phenomenal. I really loved the idea of that, and everyone was using the same program, all integrated with the current rule set and the books and everything else like that. That really appealed to me, and it did come eventually outside the beta version, but it took a long time to get out there, to the point where my interest completely disappeared. And I would say the reason why my interest completely disappeared was because I, at that time, was starting to get into the idea of playing online with people that I don't meet face to face. I would love to do some more online role playing, but the honest truth of the matter is I need time at the moment, which I don't have. But if I ever do get time, I'd like to do it again. And when it comes to online gaming, the idea of a universal program that people could use blew my mind away. And I love the idea of the virtual tabletop they had, with a standard template construction system which you could use to build your dungeons and your settings and such and so forth, and you move your models around, and the lighting was dynamic and was interesting, so how far you could see determined what you could physically see on the board. So if there's a model hiding in the corner in the shadows, it wouldn't appear on their screens until they could physically see it. I love the idea that when a monster was visible, they could see it in its scale and its glory and all the rest of it. And I love the idea that you could buy small packs, data packs, which would have new characters and new models. That I don't mind. The microtransaction thing I really don't mind at all. And that almost, I don't, to this day I don't even know if it came out. I don't believe it has come out. If it has come out, it's so far past my radar now that I didn't notice its announcement at all. And that is a bit of a detriment to the product. That was the biggest selling point for me of 4th edition. So all in all, and then the last few years they've been doing the Essentials line, which is basically a reboot of the setting. It's like the advanced, it's basic 4th edition, basically aiming at a new audience. And I would say that I've been a bit negative in this review, and I want to say something positive to end it on. What Wizards of the Coast did, which Paizo failed to do, was introduce new people to role-playing. We always bitch and complain and moan about the fact that people were not expanding the customer base of this hobby enough. And that may be true. And it probably is very true, because back in the day, in the 80s when I started playing, there were multiple box sets out for different games which you could buy at your local toy shop, and you could take it, or even bookshops for that matter, and you could take them home and open them up and play them with your friends. Dragon Strike Basic. There's a Cthulhu. I know there's a Cthulhu one. In fact, there's no point listing them off. There were plenty of them out there. And I bet everyone stuff into because my radiators will turn themselves on and they make a hell of a noise when they activate. Basically, they have done more in terms of getting new players to play RPGs than any other company has done over the last 5-6 years. So props where it's due. They have approached it in a method that people can easily adapt and get into and enjoy. So all those Pokemon players that were at the game store playing Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or Magic the Gathering or whatever, or those people are playing miniature games and such and so forth, they could go into their local game shop that was doing it and play their encounters, which was their global campaign thing, where you would only spend a few hours playing out an encounter and you get your experience points and treasure and such and so forth. And I thought that was great. That was a great idea, and they need to keep on doing stuff like that. I'm not going to dismiss 5th edition, or whatever you want to call it. I'm looking forward to reading it. As to whether or not I'll play it is a different matter entirely, but I will certainly be buying it. I'll certainly put my support towards it, and when it comes out, I'll most definitely be talking about it. Thanks for your time, guys, and thanks for going through a very long short. Ta.